Welcome to Crime Most French, a fortnightly podcast covering intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast on the Lions. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
This is episode 66, The Bloody Trunk of Millery. On the 13th of August 1889, villagers contact local authorities to report a terrible smell along the road from Vernaison to Millery, near Lyon. The gruesome discovery will lead to many twists and a year of inquiry. On the 13th of August 1889, local inhabitants contact the local cantonnier. That's each village used to have a handyman kind of guy that was doing things for them. We used to have one. That does all the commune's job and stuff. But they were seen as the first port call for weird things and complaints and everything.
So he was like the village janitor.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what they were. They would clean the streets, they would fix small things that needed to be fixed, repairs, do small repairs and whatever. So yeah, they were essentially the village janitor. So
he's kind of like the equivalent of a building's maintenance guy now, I guess.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So they contact him to report a stench along the road from Vernaison to Millery. He goes to the location reported by the villagers, called the Tower of Millery. Next to a bush on the other side of the embankment near the road, and halfway to the river Rhône, he can see a large waxed bag.
A large?
Waxed bag.
Ah, right, okay, right.
So it's a waxed fabric or whatever it is. Like a tent, what would have been a tent in the 50s.
Right.
So something like that, less waterproof.
Like a Barber jacket.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He can confirm when he gets there that, yeah, it really stinks.
Gross.
So he goes down the embankment to check, and when he opens the bag, he discovers the naked body inside in a very advanced level of decomposition.
Oh, no.
At the time, he thought it was the worst smell he ever smelled.
Mm.
Because, of course, at the time, they would be used to hunting and stuff, but hunting is fresh meat, so it doesn't stink. Whereas a decomposing body does.
I guess life was a lot more pungent back then.
Yes. So he decides that it's above his pay grade, so he alerts the proper authorities who come very quickly. They indeed discover the large wax bag with a decomposing body in it. It's tied up with rope into a fetal-like position, but it's missing a head.
Oh no.
They find another smaller bag nearby, also in a terrible state of decomposition. It has a head in it.
Right, okay, that seems bizarre that you would take the time to separate the head and the body, but not separate the actual, disposal of the thing, far away from each other.
Yeah, they don't know what to do with it because it's also on a small road between two towns, and there's just no reason to have a body there. It's kind of weird. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's a few kilometers out of town.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going on.
So, the local inhabitants probably thought it was some kind of wild animal that had gone bad or something.
Possibly.
Something had died. Some animal had died there.
Maybe. But dead animals normally don't smell because as soon as they're dead, they're scavenged by other animals.
Yes.
That's why even if you live near forests, you never find dead deers or anything.
No.
They disappear very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So they're used to that. So you very rarely smell something decomposing. That just happened to be in a bag, so local scavengers couldn't get to it. So that's why it smells.
Yeah.
So a doctor examines the remains at the Medicine Academy in Lyon the next day and concludes that the death occurred 3 to 4 weeks earlier.
Ooh, that body would have been so...
it would have been nasty and
liquefied and nasty.
Yeah. The right side of the head has been smashed, where is a heavy tool.
Right.
I don't know what. And essentially it was a mush of flesh, brain, and bone fragments.
Oh, God.
So they decide that's how he died, whoever that was.
Yeah.
I have photos of that if you really want to see them.
No, you're all right.
Whoever severed the head made a mess of it as well. The neck has a whole bunch of cuts, like they were trying to either cut the head with the wrong tool, like a knife,
Right.
or they didn't know how to do it, so they hit bone.
Okay, so we're not looking at all the doctors in the vicinity then.
We're not looking at a doctor, we're not looking at a butcher, we're not looking at a serial killer.
No.
We don't know what it is, but it's somebody who didn't know how to cut the head.
Mm.
Still don't know why they cut the head, but they didn't know how to do it.
Unfortunately, that probably includes a large percentage of the population that don't know how to decapitate a head
that's normal.
from a body.
That's a normal state for people.
Yes, that is entirely normal.
Next to where one of the bag was, the police also found a small key.
All right. Okay.
They have no idea what that's for, but they found a small key, so they collected it.
There's nothing more mysterious than the key, and you don't know what.
In the middle of nowhere, next to a dead body. Yes.
Yeah, that's very strange.
So the authorities start the inquiry, and they start with questioning the local inhabitants, and they conclude that the man wasn't local because nobody's missing. Mm-hmm. Nobody's reporting anybody missing.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody recognizes the remains, so really, he's not from here. That's pretty much all they know about it at that point.
And he was naked.
He was naked.
So you don't even have a...
There's no wallet, there's no ID, there's absolutely nothing.
No.
No, it's just a naked body, half liquefied. So the gendarmerie assumes that the murderers aren't local either, because if the victim is not local, most likely the murderers are not local either.
Okay.
We're both in the same place at some point.
Right.
So they think that they were hoping to throw the body into the river.
And missed.
The Rhone has very strong currents. Not the whole river is navigable.
Right.
So they think that they were trying to throw it in the river so it would go down river for miles and miles and miles very quickly.
Yeah.
But somehow missed that. Because the distance between the road and the river was a bit longer than they were expecting. They were probably aware of the river.
Yeah.
But they didn't know the distance, and they threw the body, which probably was heavy still at the time, and they missed. That's what they think.
Well, perhaps they did it in the dark as well, and they weren't even aware of the fact that it didn't even reach the river.
Yes, also they didn't know there were bushes on the way, so the bushes slowed down the bag and eventually it stopped.
Right.
And it was also a railway. So all that stopped the body from getting to the river. But it looks like that also confirms that the murderers were not locals. They didn't know all that. No. If they had known, that would have been stupid to throw the body there.
Yeah.
And they also think that most likely what happened, because they weren't local, they did it at night, not to be seen.
Yes.
So they could hear the river very close.
Yeah, but no.
Because it's very loud.
Yes.
But didn't really know the area.
The distance,
yeah.
No.
So during their research, the gendarmerie hear about several missing men in the wide area.
Right.
One of them was Madame Martin's husband. He disappeared about a month earlier, but she doesn't think that the victim is her husband, as he had a full beard and the victim only had his moustache.
Right.
So she thinks, nah, my husband's gone, but it's not that guy. Another missing man is reported by a hotel owner, Madame Level. One of her visitors disappeared on the 5th of July, over a month earlier. He had a bit of money, and maybe she thinks that's why he was attacked and murdered. She's brought to the Academy of Medicine in Lyon.
Don't tell me the poor lady has to look at his head.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So she's asked, is it him? The man was called Daudier. And when she sees the head, she says that she's sure it's him. He was smoking a lot in her hotel.
Right.
And his front teeth were essentially black. And the victim's teeth are essentially black.
No pre-filter, obviously.
Well, yeah, that was over 100 years ago, 150 years ago by now even. So yeah, they had no idea of why we would do filters.
Yeah.
You want the full hit of the cigarette.
You really like the taste of the tar.
Yeah. So the gendarmerie immediately identify 3 potential murderers. They're well known for their services, so I guess they're the go-to bad guys in the area.
And these are go-to if you're wanting some money or just murder. Go to these guys.
Unfortunately, all 3 were in prison at the time.
Okay.
But 2 of them weren't in prison at the time of the murder, so a month earlier.
No, right, because they were only fresh in prison.
They were only fresh in prison, so they were easy to find. But 2 of them have a good alibi for when they were out the previous summer. So they just can't make anything stick to them, even though they were known for being violent and whatever. But they were good guesses, but no.
But no.
So they can't prove anything. So they abandoned that idea. On the 17th of August, as the authorities canvassed the area, they discover about 2 kilometers from where the body was found, bits of a smashed trunk that stinks.
Has the same kind of stink of having a...
Same kind of stink as the body, yes.
Right.
The bits are covered in blood, and the link to the body is made because they find the lock in one of the bits, and it fits the key that was found next to the body. So they know that body was very likely in that box at some point.
Right. So this is body in a bag in a box.
Body in a bag in a box, yes.
Okay.
On another of the bits, they find a label that tells them that that box at some point was on the trip on train number 3 on the Paris-Lyon-Marseille train company. At the time it wasn't a national company, so there were lots of different companies.
So you weren't on the SNCF at that point?
No, that was created just before the war, the Second World War, I think. Before that, it's like the subway in Paris. You used to have 2 companies in the subway, the north and the south. Mm-hmm. And that's why you have different styles of stations.
All right, okay.
Because each company had their own style. So one of them was doing the white tiles.
Yes.
But not the other. And one of them was also doing the ornate entrances and stuff, but not the other. Mm-hmm. So depending on which old station you take, you have a plain entrance and tiles, or an ornate entrance and no tiles.
All right.
So that's the way it works. So anyway, they know it was on that train company on the 27th of July, 1880 something. The last digit is not readable.
I'll tell you what, though.
But they assume it was a 9.
It's the height of summer in
the southeast.
Oh my God, that body would have stank.
Yeah. So they assume it was a 9 at the end.
Right.
So that would make the trip about a month. No, not a month. 2 to 3 weeks earlier than the body was found. So they think, that's probably the last trip of that box, and it was containing the body at the time.
So we're thinking when you said that the body wasn't local and had come from quite far away.
Well, they conclude from that the body probably came from Paris, because that's what the ticket says on the box. So they send information to Paris, and an investigator there connects the body to a local affair very quickly. It's the disappearance of Toussaint Augustin Gouffet. He's a widower, father of 3 girls, and huissier de justice. So I think we talked about it before. They're professional witnesses for the justice system.
Yeah.
So if you want something witnessed officially, you call them and they come and they just write down what they see and whatever. But they also deliver papers for tribunals, for example.
Right.
So when you've been sentenced or when you've been notified of something, they're the ones doing it because their whole job is to be witnesses. Mm-hmm. So he's one of those. And he was reported missing on the 26th of July after having last been seen in a local cafe. That's the last time anyone saw him.
So that sounds about right.
So if the last digit on the ticket on the box is a 9, that's the day before.
Yes, so that would seem about right.
Yeah. His disappearance had been reported by his brother-in-law on the 29th of July. Mm-hmm. When the Paris police investigates, they are told by the concierge in the building, because all buildings in Paris used to have concierge, that on the evening on the 26th, she had seen people coming out of his office. Right. So he had his office as a huissier in a building. Mm-hmm. And the concierge saw some people coming out of his office on the 26th, which she thought was weird because it was very late. In that office, the police discover that papers had been thrown around, so somebody was looking for something. But strangely, the door wasn't forced, and there was 14,000 francs in the office that were still there.
So robbery is definitely not the motive then?
But I don't think it was robbery, because why would you leave that amount of money? That would be a large amount of money today, probably 200,000 euros or something. Yeah. You wouldn't leave that if you're robbing a place. So they are very confused. But clearly somebody's been looking for something. They learned that Gouffet had many mistresses. He was a widower, so he's allowed at the time. So they suspected for a while that it might be the motive for his disappearance. Maybe one of his mistresses wasn't single. So they question his mistresses, and it doesn't lead anywhere. They can't find anything that would justify murder.
Right.
The cop in charge of the Gouffet affair is convinced that it is linked to the body found in Lyon. So he decides to go to Lyon with Gouffet's brother-in-law to identify the body.
But it's already been identified.
It's been identified by a hotel owner as someone else.
Yeah.
As a guy called Dodier.
But of course the brother-in-law would know.
But you would think he would know better.
That's family at that point.
But they kind of have two possible
yes.
Victims here, and they want to know who it is.
Exactly which one. I mean, I would probably go with the brother-in-law if he does in fact say yes. Yes.
But unfortunately, when he gets there, the body is such in bad condition that he can't even recognize who that is.
Did nobody take a photo, no?
It's 1889. There's no forensic police at the time.
No, I guess not.
They wouldn't have taken photos. Well, they did take photos, in fact, but too late.
Okay.
Because I have the photos.
Yeah, that's right. Gross.
The Lyon police continues to investigate the murder at their end, and they find a coach driver that testifies that he transported the trunk, the one in bits. He gives much details about what the trunk was and what it was like and all that, and that convinces the police that yes, he's the one person who transported it. As far as they're concerned, the victim is Dodier, so the guy from the hotel. And they don't think that it has anything to do with the murder in Paris. So now we have two police forces, one in Paris, one in Lyon, and they don't agree on the victim.
This is kind of like getting very messy.
It's turning a bit messy, yes. The first twist of the story is Dodier resurfaces in Nice after reading about his own death in the newspapers.
Reports of my demise have been greatly
Exactly.
exaggerated, yes.
So that's that lead gone.
Okay. So we're back with the Parisian murder then.
But there's inconsistencies now, because now we have that coach driver that has lots of details about the box, which nobody's seen before, but that doesn't work. So they interrogate him again, and this time he confesses that he's an alcoholic and he made up the whole story.
Oh, for crying out loud.
So he never transported that box. He just managed to somehow guess what it was like. So that's that. Lead completely gone. The Lyon lead and the hotel guest is gone.
So we're back to square one. Don't pass go.
Yeah, we're back to square one, and now we have only one lead, which is the Paris murder.
Mm-hmm.
So they go back to the trunk and the label that's on it, and they contact the train company, and they confirmed that yes, the last digit is a 9.
Right.
So it was a trip on the Paris to Lyon train. And it weighed 105 kilos, that box. So then the Lyon police started to think, maybe there is a link with Paris after all. Because 105 kilos, when you take the weight of an adult man and the weight of the box, that kind of matches. So they decide to perform a new autopsy, and that's when they took the photos. But they learned that the body was buried in a common grave in the village. So without the body, the investigators would have no chance of learning anything new about the murder. Fortunately, because he was unknown, he was buried in the common pit, I guess. But fortunately, one of the morgue employees had marked the casket before he put it in the hole.
Common grave, yeah.
So all they have to do is dig until they find that box.
Right.
And they do. And then they do an autopsy. And that's done on the 13th of November 1889. It lasts 8 days.
Wow. That's thorough.
At that point, that's all they have. So yes, and they're going to pass everything, maybe not under the microscope, but nearly. The report written by the ME at the time states that the victim is a man, about 50 years old, and Gouffet is 48, so close. 1 meter 77 to 78. He shows many similarities with Gouffet, especially the hair. And I remember at the time we had no scientific police, so you couldn't do fingerprints, or Murdoch hadn't invented them yet.
Was he a smoker?
Actually, the first year of the Murdoch mysteries is 1889, so I don't remember. But anyway, yes, so none of that exists at the time. They're kind of lucky because they are near Lyon, and that's where the scientific police started.
Right.
The guy who started it is starting to have good ideas, so they use those. But based on the hair, based on other similarities, they're pretty certain
It's him.
it is Cousin Auguste Gouffet. Yeah.
Because he's not turned up to claim that he's not dead, unlike the other
Well,
guy.
that as well, yes. Yes. They also decide on what the cause of death was, and it wasn't having his head crushed, it's manual strangulation.
How on earth do you get from, he was strangled? Do you obviously have his head crushed after he was strangled?
Yes.
Right. So that was done post-mortem then?
Yes.
Correct.
They didn't know that before the second autopsy. So it's a good thing they managed.
Yeah,
That guy put a label on the casket. So they tried to understand what went on with the trunk. Why move the body from Paris? What happened to the trunk for it to be smashed to bits on the side of the road? So the police in Lyon and in Paris independently have trunks remade to be exactly the same.
Right.
And they're exposed in train stations for people to see them and say, have you seen that box before?
Right, okay. We're getting desperate now, but I like the ingenuity.
Yes. And among the people who come and see the trunk, there's a saddle maker that tells the police that this trunk is only made in England.
Right.
So it did work.
Okay.
So somebody looked at it and said, oh, that's not made in this country. So the England connection is confirmed when the police learned that the dead man had dinner a few times with a man called Hérault, who paid in English currency.
Right.
In Paris.
It's Old English pounds.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They also learned from a French person living in London that a couple, the Labordère, who rented one of their acquaintances' house, had purchased an identical trunk in London. Because news travel fast in the 19th century, strangely.
Yeah.
So people in London have heard about that story and they say, oh, I know somebody who bought exactly the same box.
I can't help but feel that if this had just been some kind of manual labourer found in a bag, all of this stuff would not be happening. This is because this guy is quite prominent and has a lot of money.
I don't know. I haven't read in the newspaper anything about that. I don't know. They just want to solve that murder.
Okay. Now, I might be being a bit cynical, but to me, it's because the guy's got money and...
Yeah. So anyway, the English connection is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
One of the inspectors, called Goron, goes to London to meet the couple's landlord.
Mm-hmm.
She gives him their names. They're Michel Hérault and Gabriel Bompard. Hérault already appeared in a police inquiry, so it seems that the case is getting stronger and stronger.
So he's got history of coming in contact with the Rosers then?
Yes. The reason why he was in London is he was on the run.
Oh, right, okay.
So they know exactly who he is.
Oh, okay, so the case is getting a little bit stronger.
Yes. He was also known for being violent against his wife. But they hadn't seen him since the 27th in Paris. So just after the disappearance.
Yeah.
So they're now thinking, yeah, okay, we have our man, but now we need to find him. So they're convinced that the couple is the murdering couple, but they just have a problem.
Why?
They don't know where they are.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
They seem to move between Paris and London a lot, so it's going to be hard to find and capture them.
That must have taken quite a few days. It must have taken about 2 or 3 days at that point.
Probably. Yeah, possibly 2 or 3 days. Yeah, by coach and then boat. Yeah,
by steamer and then by coach again.
I'm not even sure it would have been a steamer across the channel. Might have been just a sailboat at the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just a sailboat. Yeah.
The police is, however, insanely lucky. On the 22nd of January 1880, so 6 months later or so, Gabriel Bompard turns up at a police station in Paris and surrenders.
Okay. Well, it always makes it easy when the guy comes in and gives himself up.
Well, it's her.
Okay, yes.
She confesses to the murder and charges Hérault, the guy, as much as she can for masterminding the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
She explains to the cop that Gouffet had been chosen because he had habits in the same place as Hérault has his, in a cafe.
Right.
And he was known for being rich because he was taking the day's money from his job home in the evening via the cafe. So he was known for having lots of money in his pockets on certain days of the week. She also mentions that Gouffet and Hérault and a few bad guys had created a scheme in which they'd lend money to people who can't afford it to eventually seize their home. So subprime lending. That was their scheme.
Right, okay. So basically giving people money and they can't afford it and then they get to...
And then they take the house.
Yeah, okay.
So she says they had that scheme going on.
So kind of like equivalent of like payday loans, isn't it, that?
Oh, yeah, or mortgage, subprime mortgages. That's essentially what it was.
Yeah.
That's not... I haven't seen any proof of that, though.
Okay.
It's only mentioned in one newspaper, not mentioned in the trial or anything like that. So I don't know if it's true. I don't know if she was trying to, make excuses or something. But anyway, she explains all that to the police. And in addition, he had been on the bender with Hérault a few times and has shown interest in Gabrielle.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be an easy target for a trap. So Hérault and Gabrielle created that trap. They made sure they'd be on his route from his office to his house at the right time to meet him randomly in the street, allegedly. And they would start with exchanging a few words, hi, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually spend more time talking together until they had a good conversation and they start feeling that they know each other. And then when Gabrielle thought that she had him, she invited him to a flat on the 26th of July.
Right.
Once there, she had no difficulty attracting him to the sofa.
Right, okay.
And then wrap a rope that she had around her nightgown around his neck.
Okay.
So he didn't pay attention. But what he didn't know is that the other end of the rope was much longer than it looked. And it was attached to a pulley to the ceiling. And Hérault was holding that end.
That is mighty elaborate. That
Yes. So
that's insane.
Once he was on the sofa,
he was hanging from the ceiling.
She put the rope around his neck.
Yeah.
He didn't pay attention because it came from her nightgown.
Yes, he's thinking with his trousers rather than his head. Yeah,
and then he was ready to be hanged.
Yep.
The plan works. Hérault pulls on the rope
Mm-hmm.
and starts hanging Gouffet, but he resists and fights back, and he just doesn't want to die. So Hérault panics, and he gives up the hanging thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that only works in cartoons.
Yeah, well, it takes a long time anyway, because if you're not going to cut the neck, then it's just going to be asphyxiation. It's going to take minutes and minutes. So, yeah. So he runs to Gouffet and strangles him with his hand.
Right.
Hence the manual strangulation
that makes
the
sense.
doctor saw.
Mm-hmm.
Once Gouffet is dead, Hérault searches his pockets, looking for the day's money, but he doesn't find anything. So he takes Gouffet's office keys and goes to search in his office.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the concierge saw.
Yeah.
He looks into several drawers, but doesn't find anything. Given that Rosas found that money straight away, he was rubbish at killing, but also rubbish at finding things.
Well, I would say he's a typical man and can't find anything.
Anyway, once he's back, they take everything Gouffet has in his pocket, which is not much,
Mm-hmm.
and they use the pulley system to lift him and put him in a bag.
Right. And
That's
then
the
put
bag
the
that was found on the side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
The police will confirm later that the trunk and the pulley system had been bought in London, where they were hiding in 1889. After that, the couple just wants to flee once they have killed Gouffet.
Oh, yeah.
So they go to a train station with the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
They travel to Lyon, then by coach to Millery. The location wasn't chosen at random. Hérault had lived in Lyon, so he knew the area.
Right.
So essentially, he wanted to dump the body in the area he knew that was the furthest from Paris, and that was Lyon. On the way, they empty the contents of the trunk on the side of the road. That's the body.
Yep.
And they reload the trunk on the coach. And a bit further down the road, they destroy it. So they break it. Hence the reason why the Rosas found the pieces about 2 kilometers away from the body.
Right.
Once done, they go back to Lyon and they take the train to Marseille. So they continue their trip from Paris to Marseille.
Right, okay.
Because Hérault has a brother there.
Mm-hmm.
They get rid of the effects and clothes of the victim, and they get ready to flee abroad. However, first they need to go back to Paris, because dumbass Hérault has left his hat with his initials on it on the scene of the crime. So they go back to Paris. Then they go to London, they change their plans. And then they go to North America, they go to New York, Montreal, and finally Vancouver. So they really can't be further from Paris.
Yeah.
There they meet a supposedly rich French guy that Hérault was planning to rob and kill. Why not do it again?
Yeah. Let's see if you can actually get it right with the money bit.
Yes. But Gabrielle has second thoughts. And she warns him that she is the mistress of Gouffé's murder, which people have heard of, and even in Canada. So Gabrielle, who Hérault is presented as his daughter, she's 25 years younger than him.
Grim.
In reality, so big difference. She leaves him, she goes with the French guy, and they go back to France. And there he convinces her to give herself up to the police. And that's why she turned up at the police station.
Right.
So now it all makes sense.
Okay, so she suddenly developed a conscience.
She suddenly did, yeah. One murder, okay. Two, a bit too far, essentially. So Hérault doesn't want to be responsible for all the murder and everything on his own. So he writes to the police in Paris and charges Gabrielle. So she's charging him, he's charging her.
Oh, I've never ever heard of two criminals turning on each other like that before.
No, that never happens. So he moves to New York in 1890. Then he moves to Canada. Then he moves to Florida. Then he moves to Mexico. Then he moves to Cuba. He really doesn't want to be found.
Yeah, he moves around a lot.
But once he gets to Cuba, he's arrested in Havana because his description had been circulated and the French consulate asked the Cuban police to arrest him. So he's arrested in Cuba. The French police was tracking him, and he didn't know that, because of the letters he was sending.
Right, okay.
He was writing to people, and they were intercepting those letters, and they were tracking him from wherever he posted the letters. So that's how they knew where he was going, and that he was going to Havana.
He's a bit dumb, isn't he?
He's a total dumbass. No doubt about that. So he's arrested. And he tries to commit suicide twice, but again, he's not very good at anything, so he fails. And he's eventually put into a cage with 24-hour surveillance, put on a boat, and sent back to France and then to Paris.
Right.
In a cage.
So at that point, he's turned into David Blaine.
Yeah, except involuntarily,
yes.
Yes. So the trial starts on the 16th of December, 1890. So that's a year and a half.
That's quite long.
Quite fast. No, it was quite fast for something that was kind of weird and convoluted.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. And probably would take quite a while to get from Cuba all the way to Paris.
Yeah, probably a week or something. I don't really know at the time. It's before the Titanic. So yeah, a good week, I would say, just for crossing the Atlantic. So the charges are as follows. For Hérault and Gabrielle, jointly, murder with premeditation, kidnapping, robbery, breaking and entering in an inhabited house at night with a view to rob by two people or more. That's a specific thing.
Right.
And for Hérault alone, robbery attempt at night in an inhabited house. That's for the office.
Right, yes. And for being a dumbass, for missing all that money.
Yes, and leaving his head. The trial makes quite a bit of noise because the press jumps on the sordid affair because that sells paper.
Yes, of course.
Hérault's guilt is just obvious, so there's just no discussion. He's found guilty very quickly. There's no problem there. But it's different for Gabrielle because she's presented as being under hypnosis when she took part in Gouffé's murder. That's probably what they used to call hypnosis. Now we would probably call it under psychological control or something. So It wasn't actual hypnosis. He didn't do the clock thing or whatever they do. She essentially was under his control. So
he was some kind of Svengali and she was just a mere woman just following along.
Yeah, kind of.
Not.
But they're saying that she didn't have the choice.
Yes.
He was controlling her.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yes,
that's their argument.
Mm-hmm. Which is crap.
Yeah, but it leads to hours and hours of fairly violent debates in court, and the jury decides that Gabrielle is guilty anyway.
Good.
So they are sentenced on the 20th of December, and without surprise, Hérault is sentenced to death. And Gabrielle, because there are still doubts about really how much she decided to do, she is sentenced to 20 years of hard labor.
Well, the thing is as well, He always liked to give someone the benefit of the doubt if they've actually turned themselves in.
Well, I guess she solved the crime. If she hadn't done that, most likely they would never have been solved. Because they were hiding in Vancouver. There's no way they would have been found over there.
That's a bit unlucky.
So she's sentenced to 20 years hard labor and one symbolic franc of damages to Goofy's family.
I think that's even more of an insult than nothing at all.
I guess they probably had to or something. But she had no money anyway.
No.
So there's no point sentencing her to millions of damages.
She had no money because she was embroiled with somebody who couldn't look.
Who was an idiot anyway. So Hare was guillotined on the 3rd of February 1891.
Off with his head.
At 7:15 a.m. Despite an appeal. And even the 12 members of the jury, maybe they felt a bit guilty, I don't know. They also had made a request to commute his death sentence into prison. So they sentenced him to death, and then they thought, maybe we went a bit far. So they requested his sentence to be commuted, but that was refused.
So basically they had a bit of dissonance and a bit of guilt.
I guess so, yes. That's weird, I've never heard of that.
No,
but that seems
that
to
is
be what
very
happened.
bizarre, a collective guilt.
Yeah, exactly. All 12 decided that it was a bit too far. So, I don't know. The justice system said, nah. Too late. So his body is first sent to Ivry. We talked about it. There was a special cemetery for people who were
for scumbags.
Decapitated in Ivry. Yeah, for scumbags. And then his body is taken again and moved to Père Lachaise and buried anonymously in a family grave.
He's in Père Lachaise.
He's in Père Lachaise, but nobody knows where.
Wow, that is a huge cemetery.
Yes.
That's also very, very steep. And there's a lot of walking.
Yes. If you want to go around, yes. And lots of famous people.
Yes.
Gabrielle spends time in several prisons and she receives several sentence reductions for good behavior. And she's eventually freed in 1903. So she does 12 years out of 20.
Okay.
And after she comes out, she does lots of things. She even appears in a cabaret play based on her life.
Okay.
And she dies completely forgotten in 1923.
So it doesn't shorten her life that much then in that case?
She was 20 or 21 in 1889. She didn't live very, very long. She would have been 50-something.
Oh, okay.
So, but we don't know. She could have been dead anyway.
Yeah, it's true.
It's hard to tell.
It's true.
There was the one of the cops in charge of the inquiry wrote. He was in charge of the Sûreté in Paris, which Vidocq was also. And he retires at 48 and writes his memoirs. And apparently they were pretty successful. He wrote 21 volumes, and they sold pretty well.
He sounds a bit of a windbag. 21 volumes.
I know. But one of the volumes is specifically just about that story.
Right. Okay.
So that's how we know so much about it as well.
Uh-huh.
But you can't take everything he says at face value because he was exaggerating things a little bit, apparently.
Oh, of course. Oh, you're writing your own memoirs. You do tend to gild the lily somewhat, don't you?
Well, you don't want to look bad.
No.
If you're going to write it, you might as well make yourself look good. So
Exactly.
that's probably what he did. But 21 volumes is crazy. So that's it. That's the story.
That's the story of the body in the bag in the box.
Trunk. Yep.
And I always remember. I seem to remember in the 90s being told that if you had the key, you had the secret.